Hi, and welcome. You're listening to the X22 Report. My name is Dave, and this is episode 678. And today's date is May 27th, 2015. And the title of this episode is IMF gives the Chinese Yuan the green light to become a reserve currency. Let's get right into the economic collapse news. Now, there were rumors today that Greece was making a deal. And it looks like this rumor might have been used to pump up the stock markets, because all of a sudden we saw the markets increase quite a bit from a down market, which was yesterday. And we're finding out that these rumors were just that, rumors. JP Morgan is out there, and they are warning that the longer we go without a deal, the less likely we believe a deal becomes, the higher the chance of the Greek exit. And we can see with what's going on now in Greece, they might skip the next payment, which means they're going to have to make all the payments at the end of the month. And the people of Greece are getting very nervous at this point in time. We're seeing out in Greece, the depositors are removing their funds. 300 million euros were removed from the banking system, and it's being removed every single day. It used to be 100 million euros per day, but it has increased in recent days. This tells us that people are very nervous. This tells us that they do believe that there could be a default, a collapse, and there will be bail-ins. We've heard talks of the IMF preparing for this. We know that this was done in Cyprus, and there's documentation all ready to go that supports all of this. But don't worry, the central banks and the government of Greece, they're saying that even though these bank withdrawals are very high at this point in time, the situation is completely under control and contained. They love using that word contained. And every time I hear that, that tells me it is not contained. This tells me they have a major problem. And we know they have a major problem because the U.S. Treasury Secretary Jack Lew actually issued a warning to Greece. He stated that Greece has not achieved enough progress to solve the issue. He also noted that if there is a crisis in Greece prompted by a breakdown in the talks, the country will bear the brunt of the negative consequences. The United States is nervous about this situation. They're nervous about a default, and you can see from what they're saying that they are nervous. And we understand that this could create a cascading effect, which can bring down the stock market. And what's very odd right now is that we're starting to see similar signs in the stock market that we saw back in 2008. Throughout the first 4.5 months of 2008, stocks moved up and down in a fairly narrow range, and the Dow closed at a short-term peak of 13,000 points on May 19th. From there, it was all downhill for the rest of the year. So will the same thing happen now in 2015? We are starting to see signs of it. We're starting to see the stock market dip down 200, 300, 400 points, then back up. We're starting to see the decline of the market, very similar to 2008. And we'll have to watch this very carefully, because we know every time the market hits an all-time high, back in 1929, 2001, 2008, the market comes crashing down, and we have hit all-time new highs. And again, we have to remember, the government wants all eyes on the stock market, because most of the people in this country believe that this is the indicator of what the economy is doing, when this is so far from the truth. This market was pumped up using free money from the Fed, given to the banks, pumped into the market, and they continually do this. And it doesn't even make sense why the market is this high today, especially with all the revenue, retail stores closing, corporations laying off. It makes no sense whatsoever. And many of the brokers out there are saying, yeah, you know something? This whole thing really doesn't make sense anymore. It's detached from reality. And we know it's detached from reality. Just like we see everything else. When the corporate media and the government continually comes out there and tells us that, we're in a recovery because we see retail sales improving. Well, their definition of improving is when retail sales are down by negative 22% and they move up 2%, they see an improvement. Well, that's not really an improvement. That's a downward trend. When they tell us that real estate is improving, where we're 80% down from where it was at the all-time highs of 2006 and 7. And we're just bottom feeding right now when we hit the crash of 2008, 2009. There's no improvement. Yes, are they creating bubbles? Are they trying to pump up the entire economy to make everyone believe that we're in a recovery? This is what they're doing. And any little tick up, they'll come out and blast this all over the news to tell us that everything is just fine. But when we look at the real information, like the Baltic Dry Index with raw material and manufacturing, we see that it's not working out. When we see thousands upon thousands of stores close and people being laid off, how is this improving? Because we have to use common sense. Because back in 2008, 2009, when unemployment was 10, 11, 12%, as unemployment came down, why did store closures go up? Why are layoffs increasing? Why are sales of homes using mortgages declining? It makes no sense. You would think it would be the opposite. And they're trying to make you believe that this is the new recovery, when we know it is not. We understand that South America is cozying up to China and Russia. We see Venezuela is offering Russia a cooperation in the development of special economic zones, including electric power projects. Venezuela wants Russia to participate in the development of special economic zones, which are currently being established right now. And of course, as we know, the United States government tried to get into Venezuela. They want a coup d'etat. They want to take all that oil, place it on the dollar, put in a puppet government and a central bank, and it will keep the petrodollar system going for a little bit longer. This is what they're trying to do in each of these countries. But they're not having any luck. As they continue to do this, they're hitting failure after failure after failure. We see that the Chinese yuan is looking to become the world currency. And right now it seems like it has no more obstacles, because right now the IMF, which I mentioned yesterday, no longer sees it as undervalued. According to an evaluation of the Bank of International Settlements, the real effective exchange rate of the yuan has risen in the last 5 years by 33%. The IMF declaration is a surprising blow to the dollar, as the yuan now can become a likely part of the IMF's currency basket. With this move, China would be closer to its goal to establish the yuan as the world currency, and thus break the dominance of the dollar. And this is why the United States government is continually saying the yuan is undervalued, because they know the IMF is going to look at the yuan come this fall. And we can see that the IMF is really giving it the green light, saying, yes, it's meeting everything that we need it to meet, to be included in the reserve basket of the SDRs. And the United States government central bankers are trying to stop this. And they will do whatever they possibly can to stop this. Because you have to remember, the U.S. government central bankers, they love the system right now. They're becoming very wealthy. They create all the money. They have all the power. Why would they give this up? They don't want to. This is why they're continually trying to prop the system up longer and longer, because it is doomed. It cannot go any further. Every fiat currency fails. If you go back in history, it only lasts 30, 40 years. And we're at that time period where there is just too much debt. The value of the dollar is dropping. Countries are waking up. They're not using the dollar for trade. They're using their own currency, or the Yuan and ruble. And this is happening more and more. And we're starting to see that the United States government, central bankers, they're nervous. And this is why we see all this military action going on in the Pacific, the Middle East, Eastern Europe, and Africa. They are pushing this everywhere. And I mean the United States government, central bankers. Because they need to start this war to get all the blame off of them and onto another country. And this is why they're pushing so hard to do this at this time. Now, we understand that Obama created an executive order. Some people are saying it's a memorandum. When I looked it up, it was a memorandum, but they keep using executive order, where he can say anyone that crosses the border, DHS, Border Patrol, or any other governmental agency cannot touch these people. They're allowed to stay in the country. And we see a lot of the states now are hitting back at this. We see Texas was one of the first one where they said, listen, we need you to stop doing this in Texas. And we're starting to see other states now pop up and say, you know something, this is completely unconstitutional, or we would like to put this in a pending area until we review this further, so the United States government cannot allow these people to stay in the country. They need to place them and deport them. And we see this in New Orleans, where the Supreme Court ruling, the judges from the 5th U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals in New Orleans, ruled that Obama's executive action should remain on hold pending until further judicial proceedings. The decision further delays Obama's immigration order, which was first blocked by the Bronzeville, Texas lower court judge in February. And we're starting to see a lot of other states start to join in on this. And we see in a statement from Ken Paxton, the Attorney General of Texas, said Mr. Obama had tried to impose a drastic change in immigration policy without the consent of Congress. And if he really wants all these illegals coming in, why do we need a border then? Think about it. Because anyone that crosses can stay in the country. What is the purpose of the checkpoints? No one would use them. Just go over the border and you're okay. You're here to stay. I mean, it defeats what is going on along the borders. And if you would like to come into this country, which I have no problem with people coming into this country, they need to go through the process like every single other person. But we know there's other agendas behind this. We know that corporations can receive illegals and they're exempt from the $3,000 penalty on Obamacare. We understand now the illegals can take out student loans, auto loans. They can purchase houses by taking out mortgages. They can be brought into the armed forces. It keeps the bubbles inflating because they know, think about this, they know the American people are tapped out. The American people cannot take out much more debt than they already have because they're starting to realize, the people, that I can't make the payments as it is. So if you get a fresh body into the country, they can go to school, take out a student loan. You can take and get a car, take out an auto loan. You can be placed into the armed forces. Now we're building up our troops. We can have them get a job in corporations because they get their working papers. And we don't have to pay the $3,000 penalties. And we can pay them a lower wage. This is what is going on right now. And it's completely illegal and against the Constitution. And Obama knew this. This is why he waited to sign the memorandum after the elections, because he knew from all the polls that the people were against this. We see that we're coming up to the last minute of the Patriot Act. It expires May 31st at midnight. And it seems that there are some senators in the Senate who would like to have this renewed, even though it's completely illegal and in violation of the Constitution and the Bill of Rights, especially the Fourth Amendment, which tells you that our government is confused about what's important, or they're being controlled by certain powers above them by receiving, contributions to their candidacy, by investments in their certain businesses, or getting information about which stocks to pick or when something's going to come down. And we can see that most of them are bought and paid for or blackmailed from the NSA. And we see right now they are pushing this hard. They want this renewed. The president is out there, and he is saying that he's demanding that Congress renew Section 215 of the Patriot Act before it expires on Monday. So the President of the United States is saying we need to violate the Fourth Amendment. That's what he's saying. Now, of course, this does not override the Fourth Amendment. Actually, it's in violation of it. But our government officials, if you like to call them that, our leaders, which they are not leading at all, they're not leading any of us anywhere. They're in it for themselves. They don't care about the laws. They don't pertain to them. They don't care about the Bill of Rights or the Constitution. They care about their profits, pleasing their masters, the central bankers. I mean, think about it. Why in the world would they be spying on every single American? It makes no sense. What are they doing with all this data? They haven't found any terrorists. We have proof of that because the FBI admitted the Patriot Act did nothing to stop any terrorism whatsoever, and we picked up nothing by spying on the American people. Because this is not where the terrorists are. The terrorists are the government agencies that are pushing an agenda. And all of this is in complete violation. They use the spying to correlate the information, create a social picture, figure out who's a threat to their authority. They use it to blackmail judges, blackmail government officials, find out patents, investment information. This is what it's used for. We're in a fascist system right now. And these are all the hallmarks of a fascist system. This is not a democracy anymore. That's long gone. And the government is not working for the people whatsoever. And we see we're not the only country. We see England is pushing far-reaching snooper powers that are potentially more invasive than previously feared, causing deep concern among privacy campaigners. The extension of powers will come as a surprise to many, as will the speed of which they are being brought into effect. Open Rights Group Director Jim Killock told The Guardian, the government is signaling that it wants to press ahead with increased powers of data collection and retention for the police and GCHQ, spying on everyone, whether suspected of a crime or not, just like the U.S. So they are looking to spy on everybody. It's happening in every single one of these countries. And we can see by this terrorism in France, Belgium, Australia, Canada, UK, they're using this to convince everyone, listen, there's terrorists out there. You have to give up your rights. So we need to spy on you every single day. And you cannot have encryption. Because if you have encryption, we don't know what you're saying. If you want to use encryption, use our encryption so we have the key and the method to read and hear what you're saying. You have to remember, encryption has been around for a long time, way before computers. People have used encryption to send messages back and forth, going far, far back in history, where they had, every sixth word would mean something and you have a little template. That's encryption. They don't want people to have encryption right now because they cannot then spy on you. What they're telling everyone right now is that, listen, we want a government agent to sit in your home and follow you around every single day. We want to hear every single conversation. We want to record where you go. We want to look through your personal belongings. We want to watch you at night, during the day. And when people tell me, well, I'm not doing anything wrong, it doesn't really matter. Really. So when you meet a friend or a person, you go up to them and you tell them, this is my bank account. This is my private information. This is where I keep all my valuable gold and silver. So if you ever need it, you know where it is. No, you don't do that, because most of the people guard their privacy. Why is it any difference with the government? There is no difference. And we have a right to privacy. This is why we have the Fourth Amendment. But the government is trying to convince everyone otherwise. Now, we see a lot of drills going on around the world. We see Russia and China. We see NATO. We see Russia in the Arctic. We see NATO in the Arctic. We see Australia, Japan, and the U.S. in the Pacific having drills. And now we're starting to see Russia and India. They'll be joining in a naval exercise called Indra Navy 2015, starting June 1st and the 4th. And it looks like they'll be going forth with that. We know that Macedonia is in the middle of this Turkish pipeline. And we also understand that they're making deals with the Trans-Adriatic pipeline. And the United States government central bankers do not want the Turkish pipeline to go through Macedonia. And this is why they're having these protest riots in Macedonia. Basically what they're having is a color revolution to get rid of the elected government. And they've been trying to do this because they're trying to stop Russia from building this pipeline in through Macedonia. It's like a central hub where the pipeline is going to go through. And we can see right now that Macedonia is going to join the Turkish Stream gas pipeline project when an agreement on it is reached by Moscow and Brussels. And when asked about other plans, they said, yes, we're going to have additional pipelines coming through Macedonia, like the Trans-Adriatic pipeline, and they're going to offer this to Europe. So we can see right now the U.S. government central bankers, they wanted to get in there to stop the Turkish pipeline, and this is why we see all of this occurring in Macedonia, because they only wanted one pipeline going through. And we can see right now that this has not worked out whatsoever, and it looks like they're going forth with making a deal with Russia to bring in the Turkish pipeline. And we can see that these countries that are going to get this pipeline, they are going to increase their revenue. It's going to spur economic growth. It's going to grow jobs in the country. Everything good for the country and the people to make it. We see in Ukraine, the trade between Russia and Ukraine has fallen and has shrunk by 64%. The first 4 months of 2015 showed a 64% fall in Russian-Ukraine bilateral trade. Russian exports to Ukraine in January through April of 2015 dropped from 8 billion to 2.9 billion. And we see imports reach 1.6 billion compared to 4 billion in January through April of last year. So we can see that Ukraine is really cutting off Russia, and they don't want anything to do with Russia whatsoever. Because why? They're pushing war. We see that the Ukrainian Cabinet of Ministers signed a decree on issuing Euro bonds under a U.S.-backed guarantee of $1 billion with a 2.5% interest rate. We see Biden in Ukraine saying, listen, if Ukraine continually implements reforms, they will receive another $1 billion loan guarantee. And then by the end of the year, another $1 billion loan guarantee. So that's going to be $3 billion in loan guarantees to Ukraine. Of course, who's on the hook? The United States people. Not the government, but the people. And we see that they are pushing to maybe not pay Russia, because you have to remember they introduced a bill where they're not going to pay the dishonest creditors. And one of them, which is included, is Russia. And this is why Russia is very concerned, because they hold about $3 billion worth of their bonds. And they come due at the end of this year. Poroshenko right now continues to plead for support from NATO and wants investors, more investors, to sink more money into the country. The country is defaulting right now. It's collapsing. The local currency is crashing. It's devalued. GDP is in the negative. And all they're getting is more loans and more debt. And they're looking for investors. They're selling off pieces of the country right now. This is what the central bankers do every time they take over a country. Poroshenko is still out there telling everyone that Russia wants to invade Ukraine. They want it. Why would Russia want Ukraine at this point? They had many opportunities to go in and take it over, especially when the southeastern people were moving towards Kiev and Mariupol. That was the perfect chance. They could have wiped out the Ukrainian army and taken over Ukraine. Why would they wait for the U.S. to bring in troops, trainers, and let the Ukraine army rebuild? It makes no sense what he is saying. Poroshenko has signed a new Ukrainian security strategy. The strategy envisions the creation of conditions for successful European integration and ascension to NATO. We see that there is new propaganda out there, and this is just coming out in the American corporate media, saying Russia is massing troops and hundreds of pieces of weaponry, including mobile rocket launchers, tanks, and artillery, near the border of Ukraine. They're showing tanks on train cars in Russia being shipped someplace, and they're saying this is coming to the border of Ukraine. Well, I hate to say this, but in every country, they're always moving around military assets, and it's in their country. So let's say, if the United States is moving tanks around near the border of Canada, does that mean they're getting ready to invade Canada? No. They're moving their military assets inside of Russia. They can move them wherever they want. But they're using this as propaganda. And it's a photograph at a train station. We've seen many of these photographs. Here in the United States, where there's military assets being maneuvered and brought to different areas. We also see it in Russia, where they're moving different military assets for different drills that they use it for. And they're having many drills at this time. It doesn't mean that they're putting these on the border, because if they were, we know the U.S. has satellites, Ukraine has satellites, NATO has satellites right above. They're fixated on the borders with high-resolution HD cameras that can take beautiful 3D color images to let us know this is where the rocket launchers are, the tanks are, and the troops are. Why don't they show them to us? Where's the proof? Believe me, if they had the proof, it would be all over the place. NATO right now is going to establish up to 8 command units in Eastern Europe. NATO has already increased its military presence in the eastern part of the alliance with more air policing, more troops doing exercises, more ships in the Black Sea and the Baltic Sea. Stoltenberg refused to confirm whether he discussed permanent NATO presence in Eastern Europe with President Obama, which means all this that you're seeing right now is going to be set there permanently. Because every time they tell us they have a drill, every time they're saying, oh, this is just for training, we're just moving it here temporarily, it turns out the equipment is left in these areas. We see General Hans Lothar Domrose, NATO commander of the Allied Joint Force Command. He said in an interview in a German magazine, Focus Online, that Russian President Putin is a tough-minded, forward-thinking politician who is capable of foreseeing situations, but also regards him as a dangerous gambler, who is willing to use nuclear weapons against NATO troops. Most likely, NATO is looking for more funding, more weapons, building up the propaganda against Russia. We see the Libyan Prime Minister is reporting that he escaped an assassination. Now, this is the Prime Minister which is internationally recognized. Actually, it's the puppet government who was thrown out, and he's saying that people have come after him and tried to assassinate him. And he's basically pointing to the new government in Libya, trying to push the propaganda out there to tell everyone that it is time to come into Libya and remove this government because they tried to assassinate him. And he was saying that they were paid criminals, gunmen came in, bullets were flying everywhere, and he escaped just barely with his life. In Syria, we understand the forces, the coalition forces, have taken over 50% of the country. We understand the U.S., with the coalition forces, have been bombing the infrastructure, bombing the oil fields, the refineries, killing innocent citizens. But what's very odd about all of this is that in the 9 months of the U.S. and coalition airstrikes against the Islamic State, thousands of people have been killed, including hundreds of civilians. They've destroyed granaries, private oil platforms. Multiple incidents of large civilian tolls were displayed and counted. But the Pentagon denies all of it. We had nothing to do with all these deaths. It wasn't us. We have very sophisticated, direct bombing, and we don't kill people. They deny not only the numbers, but the deaths. And they're just saying that we had nothing to do with this. Well, that's absolutely ridiculous. If you are bombing all these areas, they are hitting the civilians. Where are all these numbers coming from? It's almost like the manipulated statistics here in the United States with GDP, unemployment. They're just going to deny it and say, it's not us. But the hundreds of bombing runs destroying the infrastructure in each one of these areas, because they phone ahead and they tell the Islamic State, okay, we're coming to bomb, because that's their proxy army. The only people that are left are the civilians, the workers in each one of these areas. We see that Syria is telling the French top diplomat to stop the propaganda and the rhetoric, saying that Assad has not lost control of his country and his government is on the verge of falling apart. This is what the corporate media and the coalition forces are putting forth right now. They're letting everyone know that things are completely falling apart. Assad is on the run, and it's time to go in and take him out. So they are definitely getting ready for a major offensive in this area. Meanwhile, Syria and Algeria agreed to scale up economic cooperation. Algeria is looking to enhance joint cooperation to increase the trade exchange volume, as the Algerian market needs Syrian products, particularly textile products, foodstuffs, and medicines. They affirm that enhancing trade exchange will yield common benefits. So we're going to see most likely terrorism, continued terrorism, in Algeria now to stop what is happening there. They don't want Syria going out and making economic deals. So I wouldn't be surprised in the next couple of weeks we see something happen in Algeria. The IRS was hacked, and they're saying about 100,000 taxpayer data was stolen. These are older returns. Now, this most likely is being used for many different agendas. It could be that the NSA or some other agency is looking for specific information on a government official, a judge, to blackmail them or to use it later on. They could be using this to pass CISA, which is pending in Congress right now, because as we know, when they hit any corporation or any type of website, it's always surface information, and these are old tax returns with their name and their information on it, which is really not deep information. Or they could be using this to blame it on another country or group, maybe Russia, North Korea, or another group. And they might use this and use it as propaganda to say, we tracked it back, it is Russia. And of course, these are advanced actors. It is very difficult to track all of this in a day or so. Or even if they had longer than that, most of the time it's impossible, because what they do is they bounce all this off of different servers. It makes it very difficult to track back to the source. And even the source most likely is not even in that country. So when they come out a day or two later, it is all propaganda. They have no idea where it's coming from. All they're looking at is the last IP, or maybe the IP previous to that, which is the address of where these attacks are taking place. But these are advanced actors. They know how to bounce it off. They know how to hide what they're doing. And of course, the U.S. government central bankers would love to use this against North Korea, Russia, China, to make it seem like, they have the ability to wage cyber warfare. And we have to remember, they've been telling us that a cyber attack is an act of war, and they can use real weapons against that nation or group that attacks with a cyber attack. We see the Islamic State coming from the U.S. They are reporting that there's a lot of chatter, heightened chatter, and they're urging precautions be taken right now. The corporate media in the U.S. warns against people asking unusual questions about building maintenance or security procedures. Well, I think if they're telling us not to ask questions, I think we should ask questions of why strange things are happening in certain buildings, because there were strange things happening in 9/11 before those towers came down. And we know that was a complete inside job with the help of other governments to bring down the World Trade Center, to hit the Pentagon. And we can see they might be planning something right now, and they don't want people asking anything whatsoever of what's going on in each one of these areas. And maybe this is why they're putting out this warning at this time. And we know that eventually what's going to happen is when these operatives that are set up, they get the green light, we know the event is going to happen. Now, we hear a lot of talk that something might occur this fall. We don't know if it's going to happen. All signs are pointing to it. Not predicting that it's actually going to happen in the fall, but usually we see the markets crash in the fall. We see very strange events occurring. I mean, we see NORAD moving back into Cheyenne Mountain. We understand the Treasury is holding cash on hand for the next year just in case there's a disaster. We realize that Jade Helm is taking place during the summer months going into the fall. And there are many other anomalies that are occurring at this time, which makes us suspect that something might happen this fall. And the only thing I'm saying to everyone is, if you have not prepared, you should get prepared. You should have the food, the water, the supplies, medicines on hand, because you don't know when this is going to happen. You don't want this to happen tomorrow and say, I was just about to do this. You want to be prepared for when it's coming. From everything that we're seeing that everything is accelerating right now. It's ramping up, and it's coming very soon. Listen, everyone, thanks a lot for listening. Be well, be safe, and especially be prepared. Thanks a lot.